The video that you are about to watch is an excerpt of the original. After my long efforts in dealing with YouTube's copyright management system, I had to give up. I haven't given up my projects though. And while we cannot publish the entire video here due to the imminent danger of having the channel closed down, you can still enjoy excerpts which we've carefully chosen in order to make this video meaningful, fun, and educational. If you want to watch the complete video, including the sound of the music from the original recording, as well as special edition videos which will never be published here on YouTube due to the same copyright issues, and the Beatles 150 series, as well as other series and courses, you're welcome to visit my Ko-fi or Patreon page. I hope you enjoy this video. Hi everyone. This is number... What?
I'm sorry. I need to ask you, have you ever listened to a song called Yesterday? Ever.
Okay, this is this is something that probably I should spend a moment on. Not to my knowledge. Now, those of you following my journey, you know that I'm upfront with you. Sometimes I come to one and I say, I've maybe heard this, or it sounds familiar somehow, or once or twice I've told you I've heard it in such and such a format by such a singer or whatever. Remember the Bobby McFerrin Yo-Yo Ma with Bob Dylan? So I've had a few of those moments along the way. To my knowledge, I have not heard Yesterday. Now, if I have, it probably would have been the King's Singers, because you know that there are a few of the Beatles songs which I grew up listening to via the King's Singers, which is an a cappella group. I don't remember Yesterday. We'll find out. In fact, some of you have said, in fact, I think Vlad put a quote here, let's see. One of my patrons said recently, I doubt that Amy has gone through her entire classical career without at least hearing it, meaning Yesterday, at some point. Maybe he's right. If so, it didn't register, or else I have completely forgotten, and if I remember, I'll tell you. Well, before I listen, let's see what I have to read here. And Vlad has told me ahead of time that I have quite a bit of reading here. He says there's an interesting story behind the song. He says he has been waiting for this moment for ages because, well, he told me this morning is an historical moment for you, Amy. So let's see what it is. So this is number 45 in the series of 150. And the genre is Baroque pop. Baroque pop, that's interesting. Baroque pop. Why did they call it Baroque pop? Is it because something to do with the...
That's on the Beatles website. That's on the official Beatles website.
Yes. So now I'm curious. I don't know. Are they using Baroque? Well, the term Baroque means highly ornate and ornamented, and that's how we ended up using the term for this particular period in the history of classical or Western art music, the Baroque era. Are they referring to the Baroque era classically, or are they using it differently? I'm curious. I guess I'll have to listen and see what I decide. Although credited to Lennon-McCartney, the song was written solely by Paul McCartney. It remains popular today with more than 2,200 cover versions and is one of the most covered songs in the history of recorded music. So, why is it credited to Lennon-McCartney instead of just Paul? Okay. Let me keep going then. Yesterday was voted the best song of the 20th century in a 1999 BBC Radio 2 poll of music experts and listeners, and was also voted the #1 pop song of all time by MTV and Rolling Stone magazine the following year. In 1997, the song was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame. Broadcast Music Incorporated, that is, BMI, asserts that it was performed over 7 million times in the 20th century alone. Its entry in Guinness World Records states that by January 1986, 1,600 cover versions had been made. Well, that's why some of you are doubtful whether I have escaped some hearing of it my entire life. We'll see. McCartney is the only Beatle to appear on the recording. And it was the first official recording by the Beatles that relied upon a performance by a single member of the band. He was accompanied by a string quartet. The final recording was so different from other works by the Beatles that the band members vetoed the release of the song as a single in the United Kingdom. However, it was issued as a single there in 1976. In 2000, McCartney asked Yoko Ono if she would agree to change the credit on the song to read McCartney-Lennon in the Beatles anthology, but she refused.
That's why they were not in good terms for a very, 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 very long time.
I see. McCartney says, I really reckon Yesterday is probably my best song. I like it not only because it was a big success, but because it was one of the most instinctive songs I've ever written. This is sounding appealing. The song began being written at 57 Wimpole Street, London, the family home of Richard and Margaret Asher, where Paul was living while dating their daughter, Jane Asher. He slept in a very small attic room with one window, a garret, perfect for an artist, Paul explains in his 2021 book, The Lyrics. There wasn't any room for me to keep my records, many of which had been mailed to me from the US before they were available in the UK. They had to be kept outside on the landing. But somehow I had a piano in there. Of course. You have to have your instruments with you, even if you have to sleep on them or under them, right? A small sawn-off piano that stood by my bed. Paul vividly remembers the morning that the beginnings of the song Yesterday came into existence as related in his 1997 book, Many Years From Now. I woke up with a lovely tune in my head. I thought, that's great, I wonder what it is. There was an upright piano next to me, to the right of the bed by the window. I got out of bed, sat at the piano, found G, found F sharp minor 7th, and that leads you through then to B, to E minor, and finally back to E. It all leads forward logically. So interesting hearing him talking about chord progressions like this, leading here, leading there, as if he's had some experience now, and even though he's had no formal theory training, he now knows what leads where. I liked the melody a lot, but because I dreamed it, I couldn't believe I'd written it. I thought, no, I've never written like this before. But I had the tune, which was the most magic thing, and you have to ask yourself, where did it come from? But you don't ask yourself too much, or it might go away. There are certain times when you get the essence. It's all there. It's like an egg being laid, not a crack or flaw in it. Speaking of eggs, so that his memory of the melody wouldn't go away, he wrote some simple words to go along with the phrasing of the melody line. It had no words. I used to call it scrambled eggs. The lyrics used to go, scrambled eggs, oh my baby, how I love your legs. There was generally a laugh at that point. You didn't need to do any more lyrics. In his book, The Lyrics, Paul adds, using dummy lyrics wasn't something I did a lot. It was a rare thing. This is so interesting. Fun reading. John Lennon stated back in 1965, the song was around for months and months before we finally completed it. Paul wrote nearly all of it, but we just couldn't find the right title. Every time we got together to write songs or for a recording session, this would come up. We called it Scrambled Eggs, and it became a joke between us. We almost had it finished when we made up our minds that only a one-word title would suit it, and believe me, we just couldn't find the right one. Then one morning, Paul woke up, and the song and the title were both there. Completed! I know it sounds like a fairy tale, but it is the plain truth. I was sorry in a way because we had so many laughs about it. What great memories. The next job was to verify that he did indeed write this melody. It came too easy, Paul relates. I couldn't believe it. I didn't believe that I had written it. I thought that maybe I had heard it somewhere before. It was some other tune. I went around for weeks playing the chords of the song for people, asking them, is this like something? I think I've written it. And people would say, no, it's not like anything else, but it's good. I think the first person I saw that morning outside the house was John. I said, what's this song? He said, I don't know, I've never heard it. I took it to George Martin, our producer, and George has got a wider knowledge of particularly older songs, so I said, what's this? He said, I don't know. I said, it's this melody, you know, 'cause I can't have written it. There was no conscious effort involved. I just woke up and it was there. After a couple of weeks, it became clear that no one knew the song and it didn't exist, except in my head. So I claimed it and spent time playing around with it, adding to it and perfecting it. It was like finding a 10-pound note on the street. June 14th, 1965 turned out to be Paul McCartney Day in the recording studio. The Beatles were in EMI Studio 2 from 2:30 to 5:30 p.m. recording 2 Paul songs in their entirety, namely, I've Just Seen a Face, which I just listened to, and the rock and roll screamer, I'm Down. I don't think I've heard I'm Down.
Which sounds like this. That's Paul McCartney.
Okay. Well, there's my first little soundbite of hearing I'm Down. Caught on camera.
But just for you to understand where his voice went that day.
Yeah. After an hour-and-a-half break, they returned at 7 p.m. for another 3-hour session, the only recording accomplished during this session being 2 takes of Yesterday by only Paul on acoustic guitar and vocals. I brought the song into the studio for the first time and played it on the guitar, Paul remembers. But soon Ringo said, I can't really put any drums on. It wouldn't make sense. Good for Ringo. And John and George said, there's no point in having another guitar. So George Martin suggested, why don't you just try it by yourself and see how it works? I looked at all the others. Oops, you mean a solo record? They said, yeah, it doesn't matter. There's nothing we can add to it. Do it. 2 takes were all that was needed. Well, I think it's great that they all had the instinct and the honesty and, shall we say, the humility to acknowledge when their skills, their services would be not just not needed, but detrimental to the outcome. The next order of business for the rest of the evening session that day was to decide what else could be done to the song. George Martin recalls how Paul sat on a high stool with his acoustic guitar and sang Yesterday. That was the master to begin with. Then I said, well, what can we do with it? Several different approaches were suggested and possibly tried out, reportedly even adding John on organ. George Martin then told Paul, the only thing I can think of is adding strings, but I know what you think about that. And Paul said, I don't want Mantovani. I said, what about a very small number of string players, a quartet? He thought that was interesting. Shortly before his passing, George Martin commented on the score that he wrote for the song. If you look at that Yesterday score, it's pretty naive, but it does work. I hadn't been kind of overeducated in music, so that I had a naivety as well. It's very, very simple writing, but it couldn't be anything else. If it were, it would destroy what the point of the song is, which is utter simplicity. I did this in an afternoon. I had it in my mind what I had to do, and it's just straightforward. Well, that's a revealing comment by George, by George Martin, especially since I don't know that much about him yet. I know that he had a big impact on the development of the Beatles, and many of you have said that it was his kind of guiding hand that helped bring them to a higher level, and he's referred to as the 5th Beatle and so forth. And so somehow along the way I got the impression that, he was a really, really highly accomplished, deeply educated musician. But apparently he was also going a lot by instinct, and perhaps not as shall we say, I don't want to say accomplished, because he was accomplished, clearly, but didn't have the same kind of deep background that I had imagined. Anyway, they were all just perfect for each other, weren't they? In his book, Many Years From Now, Paul continues, there was just one point in it where I said, Could the cello now play a slightly bluesy thing out of the genre, out of keeping with the rest of the voicing? George said, Bach certainly wouldn't have done that, Paul. Ha ha ha. I said, great. That was what we often used to do, try and claim our one little moment. I mean, obviously it was my song, my chords, my everything really, but because the voicing now had become Bach's, okay, they're referring to Baroque as in the Baroque era. I needed something of mine again to redress the balance. So now I have to listen to it and see if I really think that it echoes Bach, or is that just their imagination? So I put a seventh in, which was unheard of. It's what we used to call a blue note, and that became a little bit well known. It's one of the unusual things in that arrangement. This is going to be so much fun. In 2012, the BBC reported that Yesterday remained the fourth most successful song of all time in terms of royalties paid, having amassed a total of £19.5 million in payments.
A little bit more than a £10 bill.
Just a little. Well, what a story. What a project. I mean, what an experience for everyone. And then for it to come out and be so popular, it's time for me to listen. I guess I want to listen to that again. Yeah, I'll listen to it again. I guess one of the questions that's probably burning in your minds right now is, have you heard this? This line here, all my troubles seem so far away. I guess I have heard. And it must have been the King's Singers, because as I'm imagining it, I hear it in the King's Singers style. So I must have listened to them sing it at least once. But this is the line that tells me right here, this, all my troubles seem so far away. That's clearly it that's stuck in my memory. Such a simple little line, isn't it? But as I'm recalling the version that I have heard, I guess it didn't make that much of an impression on me. Meaning, okay, it was nice. I can recall it now that I've heard the melody line. Okay, yeah, I can place it. But this original version is somehow, there's something incredibly precious about it. Something very, very special about its delivery and the balance. I guess this one was meant to be done this way and no other way. In fact, this is one that could be played on the harp, but I'm not sure I should even try to make a cover of it, because since so many people have covered it already, I'm wondering, what would the point be? Since this is so perfect. Maybe for my own satisfaction to play around a bit, and maybe I'll try a line. In fact, I could even try this line right here. Let's see. You know, it's actually interesting that it starts with an F chord. Whoopsie, hold on. I gotta get my pedals in the right order. Yeah, it starts, speaking of, it starts with this F chord. And that is what he's playing. Something like that, right? So it really feels like we're going to start off in the key of F. And I guess, well, I've got to get through it again, but from what I heard, it sounds like it kind of started and ended in F. So we'll say it's in the key of F, but suddenly, right away, we have this line. All my troubles, which is more of the relative minor. D minor. And in fact, it even starts on the A major. Which means he started in F major and then immediately moved to D minor, the relative minor. And actually that's something I have commented that I notice the Beatles do a lot in their music. They juxtapose and go back and forth and kind of throw us between, is it major, is it minor? If it's minor, it likes to veer towards major. If it's major, it tends to go a little bit melancholy. They have this way of mixing the sonic qualities and leaving us a little bit uncertain. And this one does the same as well. Yesterday, all my troubles seem so far away. But as he's singing, all my troubles seem so far away, we hear the melancholy elements of what is it that makes this piece so appealing and easy? There's something about the melody that just slides in and out and glides up and down. There are no real jagged edges, are there? And it has a very pleasing, almost sentimental smoothness to it. This line here, it's all stepwise motion. And the opening, yesterday, yesterday, yesterday. So naturally sung, just as if you're saying the word yesterday, yesterday. As if that's not really the beginning of the tune. That's just, it's almost like he's, you know how musicals are. Movies, musicals. They go between conversation, ordinary conversation, and then from time to time they launch into these really dramatic, ridiculously dramatic sometimes, sung parts of the story, where now the characters are singing whatever they're thinking. Let's say The Sound of Music. That's one everybody knows, right? But and this is kind of how this one is set up. We have yesterday. Now the song begins. All my troubles seem so far away. But of course it doesn't have that same sort of dramatic, overly dramatic quality of a musical. It's just so natural. It's like we're just flowing from one to the other, from speech to melody, and it's so easily shifting between one and the other. I also like the way that this introduction is, shall I say, voiced. That's the term I'm accustomed to using, where the bass note is a little more pointy. You almost hear his nail or callus or something really catching it. Oops, I'm in the other key again. Hold on. We're going to give F here to begin with. I guess it's more like this. I can't really recreate the same sound on the harp, of course. I'm just trying to create a similar balance, a similar contrast in tonal quality, so you can, to point out what I'm talking about. These strings sound a lot looser than the harp. Nice little catch at the beginning there, isn't there? And that shift from F to shifting to the E minor. So nicely done. It's just a shift down in his in the pitch, but no extra flair, nothing. It just moves. And I guess that's one of the things that makes me feel like he's speaking yesterday. We're in the key of F major. Now suddenly the music begins, but in the minor key.
All my troubles seem so...
It Isn't it interesting the way he sings suddenly, and then suddenly the strings come in, as if that is the suddenly. Suddenly, oh, there are strings. I was talking about what makes this melody so smooth and pleasing. There's something else technical that I want to point out too, because it's all over this, and that is what we call appoggiatura. Appoggiatura is a certain type of non-harmony note. It's a real simple type, and actually it's a kind of note that we find a lot in Baroque music. Well, I'll get to the whole Baroque discussion in a few minutes, but let's go ahead and see what an appoggiatura is. So let's say I'm playing the D minor chord, and I sing, "Seem so far away," and on the word far, I have this non-harmony note up here, far, far away. Now, many of you from the jazz background, jazz or blues or whatever, would simply call that well, that would be a 9 before it goes to the octave, right? So we'd call it just a D minor 9 chord. But when we're talking about part writing, voice leading, and all of that, we think more specifically about it, and we think of it as appoggiatura, which translates as kind of casually as leaning note. It's a note that we lean onto before we move to the harmony note. And you can hear the melody doing this. Seems so far away. And it resolves to this harmony note. And there are abundant examples of that throughout this piece. I won't belabor the point, but I just want to show you another one of the things that makes it glide from one to the other so smoothly and so instinctively. I guess McCartney was right when he said that this was just an instinctive piece of music. It is. That's how it flows, completely naturally. Suddenly, there's a shadow hanging over me, as if, well, there's another leaning note, over me. Let's hear it. I said I wouldn't belabor the point, but it's so beautiful. F chord. Over me. This is the F note, the note that belongs to the F chord. But if I go over me, it's as if the shadow is over the chord. It's kind of hanging over me there. And it works well with the sentiments of the song as well, doesn't it? Suddenly. I also, so much here. I like the way the blend between the different instrumental parts works with the voice. And I understand that, well, according to what I read, McCartney and his guitar were recorded first, and then the string quartet was brought in later, so they weren't actually playing together. But even a little moment like this at the beginning of this verse, suddenly you hear the overlap between his singing of suddenly, which is again kind of the speech moment, right? Suddenly, and with the rhythm of spoken language. Suddenly, it's as if he's just simply speaking it. Then he sustains that last syllable enough that we can feel the pitch of the note. Suddenly. And because he's sustaining it, we get to hear the strings come in underneath before his voice ends. And so there's, again, it's about the smoothness of this entire piece, which glides through. We have the appoggiatura, we have the beautiful arch-like stepwise motion of the melody. We have these smooth moments of layering, transitions between the voice and the instruments.
in yesterday, suddenly.
This is also nice because you hear the bass, bum, 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 as he's singing, had to go. In fact, they start on the same pitch. Both start on a D. Had to go, I don't know, she wouldn't say. Right? But we're walking up. And underneath we hear, had to go, and walking down. So we have this wonderful contrary motion. Something like that, right? And, well, okay, this is a good moment for me to discuss the classification of Baroque, what was it? Baroque pop? Baroque rock? Baroque pop. Right. This is not writing in the style of Baroque. Let's just get it out there. It's not. It is very classical style. It has some nice, well, as he said, it's very simple. It's very simple lines and harmonies and part writing. Baroque style is different, and I won't get all technical into why. But I would put this more a simple Beethoven, a simple Schubert, a simple kind of mid-classical, mid to late classical era, a simple tune. But that's how, if I were to place it in the classical stream of time and styles, that's where I would put it stylistically. But having said that, this contrary motion moment, although it's not exclusive to Baroque, it is something we find a lot in Baroque music. Well, in practically any good part writing, traditional part writing style, where the voices aren't simply moving parallel, but they move contrary-wise a lot. It helps avoid some really awkward and confusing and distracting harmonic events, I'll call them, in the mix of voices. The idea is you want it to be smooth and nothing to pull more one way than the other way. And that's what happens here. When he's rising, why she had to go, I don't know. It's a question. He's rising up. Why she had to go, I don't know. She wouldn't say. Beautiful. What I tell my young students, it's a rainbow line. You know, it has this arch up and back down. A little more varied than that, but you get the idea. And the bass line, in order to kind of anchor it and keep it from sounding like we're just going on some exhilarating flight, the bass moves down. Had to go, I don't know. There's this pulling us down and anchoring us. And having both of those together is a nice way of balancing the different directions of movement that we hear in here.
Why she had to go.
Nice little line there in the strings as he sings, day, we hear, yesterday. Nice, it's transition material. Nothing fancy, nothing elaborate, but it walks us from him here and then walks straight into the next logical step down is yesterday. So it's a great way of linking the two phrases. Again, making it so smooth.
For yesterday.
One of the things that, other than just the music, the lyrics as well, I mean, they're melancholy, they're this regretful, he's down, he's just, I mean, she just left him yesterday, so he's kind of in this haze of melancholy. And this line, love was such an easy game to... Well, there was another line, too, that really caught me. I'm not half the man I used to be. These are both on the... Well, and all my troubles seem so far away, right? Those are the lines that ride on this ascending minor, D minor scale line here. I'm not half the man I used to be. It's so perfectly set. It's exactly what the lyrics need. I'm not half the man it's a little bit of an exclamation mark. At the same time, it sighs at the end. I used to be, and I just kind of lean into it. And love was such an easy game. And when he sings, love was such an easy, you hear him lighten it up a little bit. It almost wants to be playful there. Love was such an easy game to play. Oh, that line, simple ascending line, is such a perfect setting, and he manages to express these different sentiments so well. Just the shadings of his voice and the pacing of the little details. But it catches me when I hear it. Love was such an easy game to play. It was such an easy game. I was naive. I was just, playing at this game of love, and I didn't even value it as I should. And suddenly, here I am. I'm finding myself kind of reflecting on the pieces scattered on the floor around me, and trying to figure out what to do now. Yesterday.
Love was such an easy...
When he sings it this second time through, it sounds a little bit labored, and the way he catches his breath before he sings, had to go, why, she had to go, I don't know, she wouldn't say. I'm still learning the line there. It sounds heavy there in that iteration of it. And it's so interesting the way, as he takes us through this whole song, it's not a really in-your-face change. And we can't even pinpoint in his voice. We can't say, oh, he's darkening his voice there. It's getting more pointed here. The emotion is really being channeled through his voice. Not at all, not at all. It's so subtle. It's so restrained. And it has more to do with small details, such as this. Why she had to go, I don't know, she wouldn't say. It's the way he puts weight on a syllable or doesn't. Just compare that line to love was such an easy game to play, the lightness there. And if you're going to compare his voice on both of them, it's the same voice. He's not changing even his vocal technique at all. It has to do with how he's placing and putting weight and subtle details about the pace of it. Where is he going to breathe? Where is he going to pause? Where is he going to just let it scamper just a little bit to give us the lightness? It's really natural. Not at all put on, not at all pretense, just natural. And yet we hear it and we feel it.
She had to go.
Now he's singing that line that the viola sang, right? So instead of yesterday, now he's going yesterday, and it's his own voice that's carrying us from one verse to the other. Nice little subtle variant.
For yesterday.
that high little violin tone there, sustained. Isn't it amazing how just one little note played on the violin can change the feeling of something? This suddenly has the quality of watching a movie about yesterday. Sort of mournful feeling, mournful and melancholy and sentimental, and it just, the beautiful warmth. It's almost like we can imagine that it was, let's say, a dance hall, and there was, and I don't mean a popular. I'm thinking classy, like pre-World War II, the waltzes and the upper class string quartets and everybody in their finery and all of that luxuriousness. And now we're looking back, having been through a tragedy, and we're looking back and reflecting on what it was, and we're remembering the scenes and the tones of the string orchestra and all of that. It has a little element of that, very subtle here. The other one it reminds me of is in The Wall with "Is There Anybody Out There?" I remember when I was doing my harp arrangement of it, which you can listen to here if you want, but I wished for a violin to play that one lone note that comes later in the piece. There's something so heartbreaking about it, and so exquisitely beautiful at the same time. And here we have the same thing, this lonely note.
Yesterday.
I guess this is one of the most sentimental songs I've heard put out by the Beatles to date. There is just something about it that is, it's bordering on too sentimental. It could, if you just nudged it just a little bit that way further, it would be too much. And it would be the type of thing that would make us want to roll our eyes and be like, oh, there goes that song again. But there's something that balances it. What is it? What is that something, or those some things that balance it so that it doesn't sound like all treacle and sweetness? Well, I think there are a few things. First of all, what I was talking about, that he doesn't get really dramatic with his vocal delivery. I think that is crucial. If he were to be dramatic, it would destroy the entire piece of music. The string quartet is perfect for this. But if there were more, or if it were more, shall we say, schmaltzy, it would be too much. An orchestra would be way too much. It needs just a touch, and that is all. Any more, and I think it would be thrown off balance. The appoggiaturas that I was talking about, these leaning notes, which are all over the place. Probably if there were any more of them, it would be too much. Somehow, every little detail just happened to be placed in the right dose, no more, no less. So we can really enjoy the sentimentality of it and feel the state of mind, the state of being of this moment without feeling like it's overdone. And it's an incredibly fine line to walk. It's beautifully done. Another thing that I notice, which helps keep it, because other than that blues note referenced in the what I read beforehand, and which we heard here, I guess I didn't even mention it when it came, but it was there. Other than that, there aren't any really major dissonances or really dramatic, exploratory, or big harmonic moves. It's pretty straightforward, and well, as he said in what I read, this leads to that, leads to that, leads to that, and it's incredibly logical and satisfying and easy. And the fact that he chose this leading to this leading to this is another thing that makes it so smooth. There's nothing really to distract or jar us. But all of that is really quite traditional, isn't it? Maybe that's why they called it Baroque. Although there are plenty of other things that are traditional that aren't Baroque. Anyway. But this little element that I have talked about already, the yesterday, and then the singing begins. All my troubles seem so far away. Now it looks as though they're here to stay. Oh, I believe in yesterday. There's an irregularity to it. It's not four square. It's not like Mary Had a Little Lamb or we could even go a little bit more advanced and pick a folk song, right? But the idea is that this has enough irregularity in its lines. All my troubles seem so far away is a nice long line. And then that kind of carries through to, now it looks as though they're here to stay. And then there's a bit of a pause. Oh, I believe. That's a short phrase. Oh, I believe in yesterday. Another short phrase. So we have some long phrases, short phrases. And if we actually consider this, well, let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah. So this whole verse, if we want to call it that, I guess, yes, because then here's where the next verse suddenly begins, right? That whole verse is not the standard 8 bars or 16 bars or even 6 bars. It's 7 bars. Yesterday. All my troubles seem so far away. Now it looks as though they're here to stay. Oh, I believe in yesterday. 7 bars. Irregular. Irregular, unsquare. Although, people like to say 7 is the perfect number, right? Well, we managed to find it here and make it fit in a way that is not angular or jagged. Why? It doesn't feel out of balance because there's this, it's because it's not trying to be a 4 square phrase. It's short, some long rainbow lines, as I like to call them, and then a couple other short ones to balance out. We feel the weightedness fairly equal on each end. It works so well, and yet it is really quite uncommon in terms of songwriting. Simple songs. Most often we go for 8 bars, 16 bars. Or if we want something a little bit unusual, 6 bars. 7 bars? I think it's one of the things that helps this not be too ordinary. It's not any earth-shattering piece of music. It is really quite ordinary in a lot of ways, and yet it is extraordinary in its balance and sentiment and, expression of sentiment. The sentiment, okay, that's fairly ordinary, isn't it? But the way it's presented, there's something very special, or as I said, precious about it. Well, there we have yesterday. Oh, I believe in yesterday. What a way to finish the song. As we're contemplating all this tragedy or heartbreak or confusion that this person is in the midst of. And then it finishes with, oh, I believe in yesterday. Sounds kind of unresolved, doesn't it? As a sort of question. In yesterday. That's how it ends, right? Yep. And then, of course, he just hums it again. And yet, that is the home chord. Such a great way of bringing it to a close without closing it off. As if our belief in yesterday makes us hope for tomorrow and leaves room for this situation, this state, this moment to not be permanent. Oh, I believe in yesterday, and I'll see you soon.